Chapter 4. The next morning came and Mansu was up early, as he never slept that well again, with the shapes on his mind. He decided to go and see if Yaris had any ideas, so off he went to Yaris's village. It took him some time to get there, as he was going over in his head what they could do to make the shapes go away. And the weather was warm with a slight warm breeze, and on the way there he was looking around the forest, and the trees waved in the breeze very slowly. He could hear the birds singing. Blue sky and white clouds. Even though he had so much on his mind, he felt peace within himself. By the time he reached Yaris's village, everyone there was surprised to see him, and on his own. Yaris welcomed Mansu with open arms, which pleased Kayla, as she doesn't see Yaris do that often. Mansu and Yaris went into Yaris's hut and was there for a few hours talking about the shapes, and was still there when evening started to fall. Mansu decided to go and see the shapes again, and Yaris decided to go with him to see what they both could do, if anything, as burning them didn't work. Yaris was getting salted. He called for his men to go with him, just to make sure there wasn't going to be any trouble out there, waiting to jump on them. On the way to the shapes they could hear noises, like shuffling. It got louder as they were getting closer to the shapes. And as they got to the last trees, they stopped and looked, and what they really saw surprised them. They were watching the shapes moving, and the shapes were moving towards each other, as if they were trying to make a circle. At the same time, the men could also see white light trying to meet and contact them all. As all this was happening, Mansu could see an opening to go and charge for a war, which he did do. And Mansu ran as fast as his legs could run and got as close as about 5 feet away from it. Then he got thrown back against a tree, which is something he didn't expect to happen. So Yaris and his men did the same. They got as close as Mansu did, and they all got thrown back. All of them were in shock, as nothing like that had ever happened to them before. Before this happened, they were able to get close enough to touch them. Now all the men can do is watch the shapes move towards each other to make a circle. This started to frighten them. So they all got up and they all ran to the nearest tree to watch them. The men talking to themselves in fear, not knowing what's going on. But unbeknown to them, they were not the only ones watching the shapes move. The satellite that is circling around the planet was sending the information back to NASA in Washington. That's when Washington decided it was time to move and see the objects closer, even though they were being watched. Because they were not doing anything until now, all they could do was watch. But now, as they are moving about, that's when they decided to get closer. The helicopters were being loaded with equipment, which included radios, and the army were getting all the men ready for the last-minute takeoff. NASA was ready, just waiting for the go-ahead. The chefs were getting ready, making sure there's plenty of food being put on the helicopters. First aiders were needed, plenty of tents, tables, etc., as I don't know how long they will be there. The army had to check and double-check their equipment just to make sure that it works. After a few hours, the helicopters were all loaded and ready for liftoff, just waiting for the light to go green. In the meantime, back at the island, the shapes had landed. Mansa and Yaris and the men didn't know this. As far as they knew, no one else knew about them. So as the men thought that there was not a lot they could do now, they decided to go back to their own villages to get over what happened to them. Yaris and his men walked back to the village, and Mansa walked back to his. And when Yaris got back Kayla, she knew something was wrong and wondered what had happened to them. When Yaris told her, it frightened her that much. She couldn't think straight, and it took a while for Yaris to calm her down. She kept saying, "She can't stay there. It's not safe, not for her nor for the village." The next morning, Kayla decided she couldn't stay at the village. It was too close for comfort. And as Yaris' village was closer to the shapes, Kayla was not happy. She felt the village had to get away until there was a plan to get rid of the shapes. So Yaris said, "I will go and see Mansa and ask him if he can help us and have our village at his place for a while." Kayla said, "Yes, please, go now. Try not to be too long, though." So Yaris had got a few of his men and off they went. Walking through the forest, they could hear the shapes making a noise. They couldn't see the lights very well as it was daylight, but they could hear them moving, and the further away they got towards Mansa's village, the noise goes away. And Yaris could understand why Kayla wanted to move away from their village. Once they reached Mansa's village, everyone was busy. One of the men see Yaris turn up and ran to tell Mansa. As soon as Yaris got to the hut, Mansa came out and greeted Yaris and the men. All the village children came running up to see what was going on. But Mansa soon sent them away, and the children went off playing with their dogs again. Then Mansa asked the men into his hut and asked what he could do during their visit, and Yaris told him of Kayla's concern. Mansa said straight away, "Yes, your village can stay here if you think it will help your women to cope with things, while we try and think of another way to get rid of them." So as Yaris was thanking him for his help, he and his men started their way back to their village. It didn't really take them long to get back, and the women in the village were waiting for a reply. And when Yaris told them that Mansa was okay with them being there for a while, it didn't take long for the women to get the children and a few things to take with them. The whole village was on their way to Mansa's village. The children were running in front of the women. They thought it was great staying at another village. The children really didn't understand how worried the men and women were. Once they got there, Mansa and Yaris decided that the women and children share one half of the hut, and the men do the same with the other half, and everyone was fine with that. That is the end of Chapter 4. Next week, Chapter 5.